Hi, John here again with another Indie Creative Journey. This time we've got Mitchell Levy who's the AHA Amplifier chief instigator, and so we're going to have him talk today about what he does and how he helps folks who are on their different entrepreneurial journey. But before we dive into that, Mitchell, maybe you could talk a little bit about what gets you excited each day when you get up. What is it that kind of really lights you up?
For a long time, I've really enjoyed it's to some extent, it seems very similar to what gets you excited. I love putting tools in the hands of people to help them be effective. During the dot-com days, it was figuring out what the internet was and to tell companies that at some point in time, they're going to be doing e-commerce over the internet. And that was way back when. Nowadays, we've going all the way to where we are today. The ability for you to be a recognized expert in your space has never been easier to obtain. It requires a little bit of focus and the definition of what your space is, and then the ability to actually communicate effectively your expertise. And so helping people close the loop between what's capable from a technology perspective and from their own personal perspective, so that light bulb goes off in their head and they go, oh my God, I could really do this. That's what gets me excited.
That's awesome. So what is it that kind of got you started though, like realizing that that was your core value, the thing that you really, kind of decided that was the path you wanted to take with what you're doing? Was there some kind of moment that like kind of something happened that kind of really inspired you to do this?
John, good question, by the way. I've been doing this for a long time. I've actually been working for myself, or the last time I had a corporate job was in 1997. So I was running the e-commerce component of Sun Supply Chain, which at the time was $3.5 billion. And what was fascinating is I then went out, I ran conferences for Combex. I ran 4 conferences there. I've created 4 different executive business programs, 70 classes for San Jose State and UC Santa Cruz. And then lots of individual consulting, lots of training, many different things. When I look back on, we created an executive business program, actually the largest that professional development for San Jose State has ever done. I think we sold 3,500 courses, took in over $2 million of revenue. And when I think about success over a semester or within a class, it was what would come to my mind was those light bulb moments. It was when you got a student and sometime during the semester, all of a sudden you could see it in their eyes. They're like, oh my God, I get it. I know what to do. And so that was interesting on the class side. On the consulting side, I know this may sound good or bad for you, but at any time I get a consulting engagement, anytime I get one, my primary focus from day number 1 is how quick will it be before the client can fire me? Right? Because as a consultant, my job is not to be there to do their job. My job is to be there to give the tools and the techniques and the opportunities so that they can do it themselves. The quicker I can go in and give them the tools and framework and I can leave, the better off I am, or the better I think I am as a consultant. Now, if they want to hire my firm, somebody in my firm to do the day-to-day stuff, that's something different. But for me personally, so what does that mean? It's the light bulb moment. I wouldn't have got hired if they didn't have a problem they needed to solve. And it's when they recognize the approach and techniques that's necessary to solve it. So I think it stems back to the classwork way back when. But now every time I do an assignment, I don't know, John, look, we ran a group at some point in time called CEO Networking. So I've answered over 1,000 questions from CEOs. And it's sort of the same point there with CEOs. The answers sometimes are very long, but you start with that 7-second soundbite, the something that will generate in the old days, I used to call it the light bulb moment. Now I call it the aha moment. So it's that statement, that comment, that focus that lets somebody completely change their framework with just a small number of words, or whether it's a video or something they read. It's that light bulb moment, and you could see it, like when you're physically talking, you're like, oh my God, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's also really interesting what you said about basically putting yourself out of a job by doing your job well and stuff. In fact, if anything, I think a lot of folks, especially like people who are therapists or things that it seems like certain folks that like their jobs depends on them kind of creating more work for themselves by basically, like creating a dependency and stuff. So like that almost is like a revolutionary idea though, even though that like I do know some folks who really believe in that like basically they need to help their clients so then that the clients no longer need them. So what is it that like, was there somebody that inspired you to kind of have that approach, or was there somebody who like kind of really led you to that type of thinking?
Once again, I shouldn't say this every time, but yes, that's a good question too. I'll have to think about that, John. There isn't anyone there's no one that comes to direct mind. I mean, I could tell you, there was actually my boss's boss at Sun Microsystems who led me on the path that got me to leave the corporate world and do my own thing. But in terms of getting fired, and actually thinking about that is a good thing. I think a better way to think it through is there are many people who say we have to fail and you have to fail quickly. The venture capital community would, if you had somebody who's green with a new idea or somebody who had an idea and failed, but understood how they failed, who would they choose on equal part? They'd choose the person who failed before. So I think part of it is looking at the community and figuring out that whether or not they quote unquote fire me or whether or not we both agree that it's time to move on, that's something completely different. But I think it's the self-sufficiency, the recognition that my job was over when I was able to make a corporation self-sufficient or an individual self-sufficient. And I don't think I could point to anything in the literature. I think it's just something that, and I don't want to say you're a bad consultant if you don't think this way, but I think it's something that good consultants sort of think about, is if they're really doing their job, they're doing it effectively and moving on. Now, this is different. If you're a consultant and you're a CPA and you're a finance person and your job is to do the books, that's much more tactical. That's different, right? I'm not talking about that type of consultant. But if you're a strategic consultant coming in whose goal is to effectively help an entity be more successful, you better believe that your job, you're a Bain or anything else, Accenture, your job should be to quickly fire yourself, at least from that strategic thing, and then do something else.
Well, even if there wasn't any specific person that kind of inspired you to this kind of thinking stuff, but as Pablo Picasso would say about like good artists borrow, but great artists steal and stuff. So who are some people that you steal from though? I'm kind of curious, like where you get some of the ideas of, like for example, the aha moments. Was it simply from just your experiences, or like, but was there other people that kind of inspired you to kind of go down this path of, basically that being the main path that you wanted to take for your own career?
So the cool part during the .com days, Esther Dyson called me Mr. E-commerce, and I did lots of fun things. And then all of a sudden something happened. The .bomb came. It was 2001. Nobody wanted to speak about e-commerce. The value of my brand, which was really good at a period of time, absolutely went to zero. So it was really interesting to me. And it was a really valuable lesson because I know that I didn't do anything different. I know with 100% certainty that I was the same person on day number +1 versus day number -1. And what was interesting is how I dealt with that, right? If you're an engineer and you're working on a particular programming chip for Intel, and Intel completely changes the framework, if you don't figure out how to morph into something new, you're going to be on the unemployment line and stay there. And there are many people, unfortunately, in Silicon Valley who, much more than we want to say, who are just sort of, the technology has rolled over them and they've not caught up. So all of a sudden what happened is the .bomb came. I had to start doing other things. All of a sudden my CEO networking stuff I did started picking up a flare. And what I try to look out for are waves, things that are happening. I saw the e-commerce wave happening. And by 2005, a wave that I saw happening was the democratization of book publishing. So it was the ability for publishers to be the self-publishing thing, although it still had a negative connotation, was coming to bear. The technology was getting much easier, made a lot more sense. And so I created a company whose goal was to allow individuals like you and companies who needed to use a book as a tool to open up a door, to allow it to be much easier. So first company I created was called Happy About. And overall, between then and now, we've published 800 books, 300 physical, 500 ebooks. And the Happy About book structure was, instead of taking a year or 2 years or 3 years to publish a book, your traditional publisher, we would publish in 6 to 8 months. And that was, the writing part was 25,000 words versus 60 or 100. So it was still quicker time to market from beginning to end. And then one of the ideas that came up, I ended up partnering with a woman by the name of Laura Lowell, and we created a book series called 42 Rules. We have like 30 or so books in that series. And with 42 Rules, it was 42 500-word articles. So in essence, if you've been blogging for a year, you have a book. Right? So once again, trying to make it easier for people to put their arms around. And then I partnered with a guy by the name of Raj Sethi. And with Raj, we came up with the concept together of Think Aha, which is, by the way, I love the name better than Happy About, so I've now renamed the company Think Aha. And what happened is the Think Aha series was 140 Twitter-sized quotes. Right? So you get it. Do something based on blogs, do something based on tweets, and it's 140 Twitter-sized quotes, so it's 140 characters or less. And so it allowed us to be able to work with that subject matter expert, that expert who wanted to be recognized as a thought leader, and to create something that was faster, easier. Now, when I had my publisher hat on, what we did is we created an iPhone app. And so if you created a physical Think Aha book, we would then put it into an iPhone app so you can amplify it in the marketplace. Well, one of the things I realized is, and this is a mistake that I made, is that when I had all these publishing companies, Think Aha, Superstar Press, Happy About, Quick to Publish, we publish all the books for Synopsis, the EDA company. So when I had that, my thought process was like the traditional publishing companies. Let's put the emphasis on the brand, and let's push the brand of the company. And what I realized, it took me a little while to realize this, is that was the mistake. The mistake I should have made, I made and should have fixed, was I didn't want to brand the companies. They still had a brand. I needed to brand the thought leader. I needed to brand Mitchell Levy. And so that was a mistake I made. And so towards the end of 2013, I decided to go back into the consulting world. And do speaking and consulting and focus on thought leadership. And so I didn't want other companies to make the same mistake I made, and that is to brand their company versus brand the thought leaders inside the company. And so I went to LinkedIn, and with LinkedIn, it's easy to know who has certain titles. And so I became the first thought leader architect in the world. Now, with the thought leader architect hat on, looking at what I was doing with Think Aha books, being able to amplify after you do the physical books. Now, we talked about time to market on Happy About. 42 Rules books was about 4 months, 2 to 4 months. The Think Aha books, the physical books, was 1 to 2 months. 140 quotes. It took the author 60, 80 hours to write. They'd submit it to us. 1 to 2 months later, we'd have a physical book. But when I had the thought leader architect hat on versus the publisher hat on, I said to myself, why do we have to do a physical book to get the ebook? Why don't we just go directly to the ebook? So hence, that's where the AHA Amplifier came about. And that is to allow people to publish a book, 140 Twitter-sized quotes, directly to a platform that would allow them and their fans to amplify their content. And what's fascinating is the book that would take 60 to 80 hours in physical form to write takes 8 to 10 hours if you go into a social media enabled ebook. And I think that's just part of human nature. If you know you're writing something that goes on paper and will last forever, you take a long time to write. If you write something that goes to a social media enabled ebook, you go faster. And so now what's fascinating, John, is to actually be in front of somebody, tell them the concept, and they go, you know what, I could do this. I could not only do this, I could do this over the weekend. And so the first time, about a year and a half ago, I was in front of a bunch of consultants, and one of the women stood up and said, you know, I could do this. I could do this in a day. And so my challenge to her was, if you send this to me within 24 hours from now, I will absolutely do the entire thing for free, and I will publish it the next day. And so that actually happened. And then she announced to her mailing list that she's written this book and this platform. And 10 days later, she picked up a new client. Right. So that's what this is all about. Nice. Is if you have expertise in a particular area, instead of spending 1,000 hours writing a book, or instead of spending 100 hours writing a book, you could spend 8 to 10 and you write the book on a very focused topic. And by the way, if you're only spending 8 to 10 hours, you make it very focused, and then you do 2 or 3 of these things. Then your goal is to not only tell people you're the author of this book, but also, and not only to share the content yourself, but also to then get your fan base to be able to share that content. And the content is in tweetables. I call them aha messages. They're Twitter-size formats, Twitter-size bite-sized content pieces, whose goal is to encourage your audience or the reader to have that aha moment. And so it's sort of to answer your question, it comes to, we sort of backed into that in terms of what the end result is, and now we lead with it. So when I tell the world 3 things that are important to be a thought leader, number 1 is talk in 7-second sound bites. Give people something that put their arms around immediately, and then they will ask you for more, and then you could either share more or direct them to more. Number 2, and this is different from the days that we grew up in, 80% of the content a thought leader shares should be somebody else's. Right? So let me tell you why. It's really, as soon as I say it, you'll get it immediately. In the old days, the Tom Peters days, we wanted Tom to stand on a pulpit, and all we wanted to do is listen to Tom because he knew the answer. Right? Jeffrey Moore, Tom Peters, right. You know, the big guys from way back when. Nowadays, there's so much content out there. There's so many things going out there. We want the thought leader who's a curator. We want the person to tell us, oh, by the way, there are 3 or 4 different ways you can go. Here's what some of my competitors do. And if it turned out that you want to go in that direction, these guys are good because, and then this is what I do. Right? And we want the person who's going to curate that content for us in the framework that's relevant to us as customers. And that's why 80% of what you share should be somebody else's. Now, here's number 3, and this is terribly controversial. 100% of the employee base within an organization should be thought leaders. Right? So what does that mean? Well, if it's the old days thought leader of Tom Peters, well, that's not what I mean. Let's define what a thought leader is. A thought leader and by the way, anyone who wants to go to thinkaha.com, I have a tab there called thought leader. And so I give a definition in a 2x2 what a thought leader is. So you can certainly go, that's at thinkaha.com. There's a tab for a thought leader. A thought leader is a recognized expert in their space. Okay, recognized expert in their space. So I didn't define what space is. Space can be within a company. You have an IT problem. You need to call IT to get help. Who do you call? You call your thought leader. You call your IT. Who's your thought leader, right? Because when you say to your IT person, hey, how do I do this? Or what's the best way to do that? And if they give you an answer, you expect that answer to be the best answer in the marketplace, that they're familiar, they've curated all this other content, and they've given you the answer that's appropriate to you. Right? So the space in that case doesn't have to be an external space, it's an internal space. Take that same definition to a particular vertical, right? The vertical could be very narrow or very wide. The harder it is, the harder it is to do. If we're also talking about geographic space, right? The geography could be very local or it could be very broad. Once again, the broader it is, the longer it takes. So that's the one that's controversial, but with the definition in mind that 100% of your organization needs to be thought leaders. By the way, what does that mean? That means they're fans of the company. That means they're advocates of the company. That means they like what they do. You know, how do you like calling somebody for AT&T or Comcast, and you're calling customer service roulette, and the first answer you get you don't like, you hang up, you call back, you get a different answer. Okay, these are not thought leaders, right? You want the answer that's relevant to your particular situation.
That definitely raises some interesting ideas, though, along the lines of, like, you know, for example, a music artist is somebody who, you know, they're typically we're interested in their lyrics and their, you know, but then, like, if we expand on that, you know, if in fact, you know, like the fans could be thought leaders, then we're talking about like somebody who like tweets something really moving about the artist or something that, or the way the music moved them and stuff like that. It really opens up some really interesting possibilities. So I think that's something that, like, for me, like, just even as we're sitting here, that, like, I'm realizing that, like, it's definitely beyond simply the idea of, you know, like, authors and like, you know, because we tend to think of those folks as being the folks who generate things that are tweetable with their quotes and their ideas and stuff like that. Just expanding it on the possibilities of anybody who has, you know, a fan base that, like, can possibly also become part of what's the body, I guess, of thought leaders. That's really like a mind, you know, blowing kind of concept to me. So I guess my question also then is, if in fact we have these other possibilities and stuff, like, you know, what's the kind of, like, I don't know, how do we kind of knock down some more of the barriers? Because I think part of what happens is that, you know, maybe these ideas are here and there and stuff like that. So what are some ways that, like, that folks can basically start kind of helping to spread these ideas, like, you know, based on, you know, using the AHA amplifier, the things that you're doing?
If you don't mind, I'm going to answer this question very personally for the AHA amplifier versus the generic answer, which there are also many other tools and approaches to do. So if you go to ahaamplifier.com, what's interesting is, as a user of the system, you can go on today. You could sign on as a guest, so nobody even knows who you are. If you sign on with one of your social media accounts or email password, then you don't get that annoying guest question every now and then, and the system will remember you a little bit more. But you could sign on today, and you have at your fingertips close to 30,000 already curated AHA messages to share. So if you want to share content, and if you believe that 80% of the content you share should be somebody else's, I've got 30,000 quotes you can share from people who, some are well known, some are very well known, and some are obscure. Doesn't mean that they don't have cool things to say. And your fan base, whatever that is, however big that is, probably wants to hear, or I assume they want to hear, from you, your curated version of that content. So you don't have to sit there and write an entire book. You can sit here, go to the AHA amplifier, look for quotes you like, and start sharing them. Now, you can share them on social, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, or next presentation. If you want to share a quote on Albert Einstein or Sun Tzu, we actually took some public domain books and created, AHAs about them as well. So, you know, P.T. Barnum, one of my favorite entrepreneurs of all time. You want to share a quote from P.T. Barnum, you could go online, you could search for them, or we have 140 of them that are available for you to pick and choose. And so what's interesting today, if for my axiom number 2, and actually axiom number 1, 7-second soundbite, capture their attention, 80% of the content share somebody else, you might as well go to places where, and we have the first 100% curated thought leadership engine in the marketplace. So that's at ahaamplifier.com. Now, thank you.
Awesome.
Once you start using that, then you should create AHA books. AHA books being 140. And now, the thing we started with publisher mind in hat is I started thinking about it like a book, right? Oh, let's grab a book, let's grab a topic. But you mentioned something, and let's explore that. If you actually have an interesting fan base, why don't you ask the fan base what they're doing means to you or means to them, right? So what does this music mean to you? Or what is the music you like that helped you have this type of moment, whatever it is, romantic moment, hateful moment, whatever, whatever it is, if that's your, if you're Meatloaf and you want to have your fans tell you what they hated most in music, hey, if that's your brand, then why not ask them and create an AHA book with that content? So Joel Comm, who is known for the hashtag do good stuff, Joel went to his Facebook following and he said, hey, listen, I'm doing a book with Mitchell Levy, and why don't you answer the question of what hashtag do good stuff means to you? And he posted that once. He had enough responses. Now, enough in this case, I think we did a book with, instead of 140, we just did 86 AHA messages. But I had my team go in and pull the content, put them, sort of do a little bit of rewriting. Probably when you crowdsource stuff, just so you know, people submit content in first, second, and third person, and you want a consistent voice. So I had my ghostwriters go in and just make a consistent voice. And then Joel spent 20, 30 minutes reviewing the content, and his book was done. Right? It's a very powerful tool, but think about this anyway. We had John, you'll love this. We had a teacher in the Philippines who was teaching marketing to her seniors in college. She crowdsourced a book among her class. And we included, just so it was fun, all the contributors' name and their Twitter handles as part of the book. After the book was done, she asked the class to share the content. So it's our biggest amplified book. And in talking to her, one of the things she told me is that over 50% of the class got jobs because they had participated in this vehicle. That's cool stuff, right? So what I'm looking for is when the AHA moment goes off in guys like you, and you start thinking about ways to use this platform in ways that I hadn't thought about, which is great, and trying to make things in a different way. Let me give you one other interesting idea, which we haven't talked about yet. We have a concept in the AHA Amplifier called the AHA Library. And if you go under dashboard, it is the tag to do that. I need to make more videos and more training stuff. So when you start using it and you stumble upon something, you go, hey, Mitchell, that should have been in a training video. Let me know. There's still stuff to do. But we have a concept called the AHA Library, which is really a collection of AHA books. And if you wanted to create, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but if you wanted to create a AHA library on creating 1,000 true fans, you could go into the AHA library after the show. I'm sorry, the AHA Amplifier after the show. You could create a library, take about 5 minutes, and search for AHA books that are complementary to what you're talking about. And you can have an AHA library in place in 5-10 minutes and start directing people there. None of the content's yours that you've written, but all the content happens to be things that help people generate those 1,000 true fans. And then as you start writing your books, you can point people there. You have a URL you could send people to. And what's also interesting is you could start telling your audience, you have a great message. I'm getting interesting amplification from my AHA library. Why don't you write an AHA book in this area, and I will make sure I add it to my library and I'll amplify it for you. And all of a sudden you become somebody who can then amplify other people's content because you're getting good traction to the library you've created that helps amplify the message that you, John Chang, is amplifying in the marketplace. That's what the AHA Amplifier is about, right? So you could do this today in 5 or 10 minutes, and then over time, use it as a tool to get further along.
I'm having an aha moment right now about what, like, even though I'm familiar with your work and stuff like that, and we've talked for some time and everything, but what I'm starting to realize about what really makes AHA Amplifier different from, say, Kindle or, some of these other ebook platform stuff is the open source quality of it. That's something that, like, just like Legos has their, the Arduino, and then, even some of these other robotics have the Arduino, the open source system where basically people can go in there and do tinkering, and then they can share codes, they can share like kind of things that's within the platform that, in other words, their work isn't isolated to just simply what they're doing, but then everyone else can also see, oh, hey, like look what, Joe's working on over there, and then that's how that's working, so and they can learn from each other. And so for me, like, my aha moment today from us talking is that what makes the aha amplifier really unique is the fact that like there's this openness to sharing the knowledge and the ahas, that like isn't available in some other platforms where basically they're built on where, oh, you have to buy this ebook to get to get that knowledge, or you have to basically really read it down into it. It just, in other words, it's more siloed, and it's not so much about this kind of open sharing of the ahas and the knowledge and stuff like that. So that's really, for me, like something that I definitely find that I want to make sure other people know about them, that like really it just opens up a world of possibilities. So thank you for like kind of bringing that to my attention and stuff like that.
No, my pleasure. And this is the interesting part. You and I have talked before. You sort of knew it was out there, but the light bulb hadn't turned on. I see it now. It's turned on, right? That's great. And you asked me what got me excited to wake me up in the morning. It's this moment right now. And it'll be interesting to see. And I'm happy. I'm around to help, in whatever you do. I think and you also presented it in a way that I hadn't heard before. So for me, I've also had that moment that there's a certain class of people that I need to present the aha amplifier in the way you just presented it, right? Which is the open source, tinkering, pulling things together. And what you made me think about is, just to be obvious, I think I said it before, but let me repeat. The aha, a particular aha message, a Twitter-sized quote, by definition, should or can include a URL. Now that URL can point to any website, SlideShare, YouTube. It could point to the book that you actually have for sale on Kindle or on Amazon or somewhere else, right? So it's a way in which you could tie together all of the different thought leadership components you're doing. You could tie it together in an aha book, and then of course, because it's so easy to create, you can modify that aha book over time. So when things go stale or go out of date, or you want to create a new one, or you want to do a customized version. I think what we hadn't talked about, John, what's super cool is when you go from the physical book to the ebook, that just takes a long time. When you've created the ebook, the social media enabled ebook, and you really like it, you then go and create a physical book, right? And that's where we've done this a lot. I love looking at what we did with Alex Mendozian. He's got both the paperback version and the hardcover version. Now, how cool is this? I mean, this is about as solid as it gets. Love the spine, and the inside of the book is 140, as you can see, 140 Twitter-sized quotes. What's also fascinating, and this is relatively new, and don't show anybody else, is the technology has gotten to the point where we could actually now do color at an affordable price. And so the books coming forward, most likely we will do with color on the inside, and it just makes for a powerful popping. And so once again, you're creating your aha book in 8 to 10 hours. You decide that you want to upgrade to the physical book, and you have the opportunity to do that, and then you could customize it for every audience. So this is, if you're doing a bunch of speaking engagements, particularly if you're doing engagements around the country, why don't you make a custom book for every city? Because then when people are getting that content, so maybe 80, maybe 90, maybe 99% of the content is the same, but you've changed a couple of things that people go, oh, I've got this physical book, but it says, hey, thanks to you guys in New York, and it has a paragraph or a couple of the ahas are swapped out for specifically New Yorker language and focus. And all of a sudden, it's much more relatable.
Yeah, that is really unique in itself. Just be able to kind of get it down to like a specific group of people. Again, which is, what you talk about different times is like kind of, basically adapting to the audience and stuff. But to that level, that's really something that I think is revolutionary. I think one of the things I want to just do, as we wrap this up and stuff, just like, so what's the best way to get for folks to, learn more about the AHA amplifier? What's the best way for folks to learn about you and stuff? Yeah, I'd like to just basically share that before we go.
If you want to go directly to the AHA amplifier, it's ahaamplifier.com. And it's pretty straightforward. There's a button there that says join us as a guest, or you can go through and sign in. If you want to learn about me, obviously connect to me on LinkedIn. I've got a thought leadership best practices group on LinkedIn. Or what might be worthwhile or interesting is I put together a call to action on the back of my business card. And I now do the call to action in the back of my books. And by the way, if you're going to do a physical AHA book, by definition, you're going to do a call to action. And I'll just show you, this is what it looks like. That's the call to action. It says act now. And what it says, if you want to become a recognized expert in your field, i.e. if you want to become a thought leader, there are a number of tools that are available, and you go to aha.pub/me. aha.pub.
Awesome.
So we have a tiny URL service called aha.pub. And so, by the way, when the business cards came in, I said, holy cow, I don't know where that's going yet. So I created it's an 18-minute video, and it looks at the 7 different services. Some are paid for, and then some are free. But one of the things which is free, John, if you're actually looking at the video, is I created a course on how to do social media in 5 minutes a day. And the course is a 30-minute video. It's 6 5-minute videos, right? So it's 30 minutes of video. It'll teach you how to do social media in 5 minutes a day. It's listing at $99. We sell it for $49. If you watch to the end of the video, I'll give you a coupon code to make that free.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mitchell, and definitely appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.
My pleasure. Nice to talk with you.